Hello and welcome to the first season of Talk Sustainability with Sandeep. I'm your host Sandeep Raghuvanshi, and over the course of this podcast series, we will deep dive into corporate sustainability from an Indian context and investigate more through our conversations with multiple relevant stakeholders. It is estimated that around 40% of total food produced in India is wasted. More than half of India's urban waste is organic in nature, and food waste from kitchens and groceries is among the largest components within that. For the natural process to continue, most of this should go back into the soil. But this is not how it is right now. With most Indian cities, it either decomposes in landfills or lies in neighborhood mounds. So, what are the options available for bulk food generators in cities? To discuss this today, I have Kabir Udeshi from Mumbai, who's founder of Flycatcher Technologies. Welcome, Kabir. Could you briefly introduce us about what you do?
Thank you, Sandeep. I'm an engineer. That's what I like to think of myself. And I've taken on the challenge of processing food waste. It was something that I was concerned about 10 years back. And I started working on this full time since 2013. Yeah, 7 years now I've been working on waste management and in particular treating the food waste. It is the largest component of waste generated and seems to be the one that needs most attention but is the most ignored. So my first step was actually to just make my own home zero waste and not contribute to this problem, which I succeeded in 2013. And since then, my home has been zero waste in Mumbai. And then I started helping other people doing that. In order to be able to continue this work, I started as a proprietary firm and eventually founded Flycatcher Technologies LLP, which is providing solutions primarily to the Indian cities. Our main work currently is in Mumbai and Goa, where we enable organizations, so hotels, hospitals, societies, to become zero waste by processing their food waste at source. So we provide the technology and technical support. That's the kind of the operation we run right now.
Food waste is, of course, a large issue, right? And we are talking about, let's say, the bulk generators, as you mentioned, from your hotels, from the industrial kitchens, from so many other places, including the one which has not reached the kitchens, like in groceries. So, which of these are the primary sources of the food waste generation where your technology has been most adopted?
Yeah, so the technology that we've developed currently, the main customers are hotels and hospitals and yeah, so it's canteen. We also have the military using it. We also have schools. So it's a mix. We don't have one large, but I guess off late it's been yeah, yeah, I guess it's all over the board. There's no one particular sector that necessarily I can identify. It just seems to be a mix of government, hospitals, schools, and hotels. That's what we're seeing right now.
So what is your method of handling the food waste? What I understand, of course, is from biogas, and which is a slightly superior way because even the compost that is generated is a bit superior. So, what exactly is the process by which you assist these organizations to manage their food waste?
Right. So yeah, we've worked on the basic engine is called anaerobic digestion. What we use, we chose this engine from our own experience of processing food waste and what is actually practical, right? So for an urban setting, right, in a city, in a modern city, what we need, what the waste generator needs is something that is compact, easy to use, and reliable, right? So these are the three primary objectives. So we say that there are four major factors, right? So compactness, ease of use, odor free, and reliability, right? So these mean four factors, and we worked on developing the technology to be able to do that. Right, so we worked on anaerobic digestion, and the basic process is the waste generator. All they have to do is is crush the waste and feed it into the system. So the system comes with a inbuilt crusher or a feed station is what we call it, and that this feed station crushes the waste and it pumps it into the system. Now the rest of it is completely automated. So it's controlled by a microprocessor, and we also monitor the system remotely. So the system works using naturally occurring bacteria and processes all the food waste into biogas and organic fertilizer. So currently the biogas is used to supplement cooking needs in kitchens, and the organic fertilizer is used in the gardens of these organization. Yeah, so that's how we work, and the main criteria for it is again ease of use and reliability, which actually makes it practical. What I believe, or the reason we've had the success is it's something that actually is sustainable and practical.
Sure. So if we just break down the process and the four components that you said, so what are the investments that the organization needs to make in terms of the space, in terms of money, any maintenance requirements, energy consumptions, and how exactly to channel their waste? So if you could just explain what exactly are the investments that those organizations have to make for this.
Right. So if we kind of take an average size system, right? So the investment depends on how much waste is generated, right? So I mean, the investment cannot be the same for someone who generates, you know, 5 tons of waste versus someone who generates 50 kg of waste, right? So it system changes based on and the investment, right?
Yeah,
So
in terms
if
of the components, in terms of the components of the investments that have to be made.
So the components of the investments, one would be a little bit of time. So there'll be some manpower, fairly low investment. Then, of course, there would be space required, and so those are the inputs, right? There would be some capital required to buy the equipment, and then the outputs would be biogas and organic fertilizer. In addition to that, of course, one more input is electricity. But overall, you generate 10 times more energy than what you put in, at least, or even higher in terms of. So your energy cost is actually negative. And yeah, so in terms of even fertilizer savings, you would actually save more than in your manpower. So overall, you get it's actually a cost benefit. You actually get a profit on running these systems.
So, just to sort of try to visualize that, if you could help us with one, let's say, one scenario, one case study that you have had where this was very beneficial to the organization and it has been continuing for some time, and also give one where someone was interested, but because of certain constraints, they might not have been able to put up the system. So, what would be those factors also?
Okay, so we'll start with where we've actually had systems running, and I'll talk about a system in Mumbai itself. So it's been running now for 3 years plus, and they're a non-profit hospital right in Bandra in Mumbai, and they were actually, they have a very positive attitude, right? So when this concern was there in the city that people need to do it, and they got to know of it. They said, okay, let's do it, right? It's a requirement, and they went forward, and the team said, let's do it, and they got in touch with us. Among other people, and so I guess they liked our work and our approach, and they went ahead with it. So besides putting the system, it's run by sisters who live there. So the sisters took a lot of interest in ensuring that the waste was collected at from the various wards in a segregated manner, also putting in the right people to feed the system, right? So they collected it in a systematic way, fed it. They also ensured that some level of cleanliness was maintained. So of course, when you put the waste in, there's like to be some stuff fall on the ground. So they always ensure the place is spick and span, and they also, whatever advice we gave, whatever technical support they needed, they allowed us to come in and support them. So overall, the positive attitude of the hospital was actually a very major factor in making this happen. And it also has resulted in some very fantastic benefits for them. So what the sister told me is one day they actually had a failure of their natural gas supply line with which they cook food. And because they had the biogas, they could finish most of their critical cooking, which they needed to feed some patients and and till that natural gas supply was restored. So in the morning, it was something that worried them, and now they even have a backup. So that was the value of something like that was much higher than the what you could put down on paper. That's something that they really mention. In addition to that, of course, they understand waste, and they know they're doing the right thing, which is another great positive. They've also been their work has, or their effort has been acknowledged by the local municipal bodies and elected representatives, and also their work has been appreciated by, they have an accreditation. I think I'm not totally familiar with that, but there's a accreditation board for hospitals. And when they did a survey of the hospital, they actually, the fact that they were managing their waste gave them, I don't know what, but it was really appreciated that they do this. Yeah. So overall, it's not just about, I mean, it has a little bit of inconvenience in the beginning and getting used to it, but the positive effect and has been really, really fantastic. And they're really glad that they did. And then you said, what about places that didn't go ahead? We've actually got most of our work from word of mouth.
So let me rephrase that part of maybe just reiterate
Yeah,
that part of the question. So
yeah.
was there any instance where someone was interested in the system, but because of certain constraints, it was not feasible for them to have that?
So, interest is there on many grounds, right? One is there's a general interest. Like people say, okay, yeah, we want to manage our waste, right? So that's and we need to do the right thing. So that, I think, that kind of awareness is there everywhere in society, right? So that is one level of interest. Now the other level of interest is, okay, let's do something about it. We know we have to invest some amount of money into this, and let's see what we do. So that's the second level, when you actually get down to it and start, putting in a budget and stuff. So now the thing is, when you need to invest in something, many people would say, okay, this is too much for us to invest in a waste management system, and they try and avoid it, right? So they would continue doing what they're doing. So that's the second level of interest. And the third is, okay, when you go and say, okay, let's do it, right? We have to do it, and we're ready to invest in the amount. So once we get down to that, we've actually never not been successful in actually doing a system. So it's more a point of just getting down and accepting that you have to invest in something like that.
So one is, as you said, the cost could have been a reason. What I'm trying to understand here is that as a byproduct of your process, or rather the two products of your process would be the gas and manure, right? So if someone does not have a facility, let's say does not have a garden, or they do not have a facility where you have a big enough portion where you need to use that manure, would that be one of the constraints for the adoption of this system?
Not really, because the quantity overall per day is so small. We've never felt that, and it yeah. So there's enough space, or there are always enough plants around where you can use this. It's not
Okay.
definitely not a constraint.
So let me then try to understand that what is the ideal size of the kitchen waste that comes out, let's say in terms of tonnage, or in whatever manner you would want to mention that, which would make it an ideal solution for any such organization.
So again, there is no. So ideally, we want zero waste, right? We don't want any kitchen waste coming out. But there, by the way, when things are cooked, there always is wastage in terms of, at least in terms of peel. There's always some excess food. You can never cook perfectly, right? Based on your consumption is. So there is no ideal size. It just whatever waste is generated, based on that, we can put in a system and support. So like I said, we even have single homes processing their waste, and then we're doing a large block of a city as well. So it all depends on what is the size of and quantum of waste, and what is the area you want to target.
Yeah, but
But
when we look at the
I
bulk kitchens, let's say, right, when we look at bulk kitchens, so bulk kitchens have multiple issues. One is the waste. Okay, in ideal world, we don't want to have any waste, but the reality is that there will always be some mismatch between the supply and demand, and generally it will be to have more supply than the demand would be, the consumption would be, right? And then there are also inedible portion of a certain plant, and there is some natural waste that always comes out from the kitchen anyway. Now, for a bulk kitchen, to have this, they have other costs also in terms of waste disposal. There are regulatory aspects also. So what makes it a ideal scenario for the solution to be applied in a bulk scenario, in a bulk kitchen scenario?
So okay, so again, it depends on what you want to do. So a lot of people would be they're happy with the waste being collected, even though it's actually a regulation, right? That waste should be processed at source, but there are ways to get around it. Yeah, so if you can get around the law, then there's no need to actually process your waste or make any investment in it, right? But moment you want to do the right thing and you want to follow the law and you want to support your community, then you go in for it. It's as simple as that. So it just depends on what you want to do and how you want to run your operation.
Sure. So which are the primary regulations that apply on? So of course, one is on the generators. So there are the regulations in terms of them having to process the waste if it is beyond a certain amount. But let me rephrase the question rather. What various health and safety regulations will apply if they were to use this technology in their premises?
So the only regulation that encourages them to process their waste is the Solid Waste Management Rules 2016, which requires every bulk generator, so anybody who's generating more than 100 kgs, to process their waste within the premises. Yeah, so as long as so that is the main thing that actually mandates that they process their own waste. And besides that, there is no other regulation, stopping them from processing their waste.
But once they start using the technology and they start generating the biogas, would there be additional regulations from, let's say, because of the energy being generated, or any other additional regulations from health and safety that will be applicable on those premises?
No, there are no other regulations because everything it's totally environmentally friendly.
Okay, so I mean, this there is a favorable regulation. All there is in general a sense among most of the people and organizations that they understand that this waste is a big issue. They need to do something about it. For food waste, there are only couple of options which essentially are available, and this is slightly superior to just composting it because you are able to also capture the gas, and it takes out the carbon. It also improves the quality of the manure that comes out. So what are the main reasons you feel that this is not being adopted as widely as it should be?
So I mean, yeah, so there is a lot of interest, right? There is no doubt, and we are growing, and our growth rate is very high, right? But yeah, the question is, why isn't it everywhere, right?
Correct.
So it's a mix. The answer is a mix. The first thing is when the favorable regulation came in, a lot of organizations went ahead and purchased these composting machines, and the people have invested a lot of money in them. What actually happens is, to sustain the operation, right, it actually requires a fair amount of space. So this space requirement is also sometimes a requirement of getting sawdust and a lot of manpower. So the operating cost of composting technology is very high, right? So then a lot of people got discouraged at that point of time. And so right now the market is more mature. They understand, the whole, as a population or as a community, we understand, we've had that experience with composting, and we know in reality what it takes to make it run. So then now when they have this second option there and people are looking at it and using it, it is getting its due recognition and appreciation for what it does. And yeah, so as a company, we've also need time to grow and meet the demand and fine tune our product. So I think overall, the function of realizing what needs to be done and the technology that's required for it to happen, coming into into action and proving itself. And now, of course, we know there's a demand all over India, and or maybe even the world, right? So the world has a demand, but as a company, of course, there's investment required, and still investors are not, I guess, confident, or there's still a little. There's a lot of doubts about whether government will follow up on its regulations, whether people will actually do the right thing. But I think over time, people will see that the right thing is what actually sustains and grows. So it's a mix between a lot of doubts in people's minds about whether the right thing actually works. I would say so. A mix between investors, people on the ground, stuff based on what is sold. So yeah, big mix. I can't give you a simple answer, I guess.
So I think, I mean, it's one thing about the company. So I was more interested in trying to understand the overall solution being adopted, and then of course we are talking about individual solution providers who enable those solutions to be presented to all the companies. Now,
Mm-hmm.
food waste is generated. We know it's a massive amount, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
organic waste is more than half of our municipal waste. The regulations
Mm-hmm.
also require in one way, but besides regulations also there are a lot of practical challenges also with the organizations, and hence they need to do something or the other with the food waste that is being generated. That is true even for the households now. So the
Mm-hmm.
solutions have to be there, right? So one is, okay, composting, something that happens outside the city, which has its own set of challenges. To be able to do that in the backyard, there are technologies, and you are one of the providers in this particular technology, which is the currently probably the most viable option. Would that be fair to
Mm-hmm.
say that it's currently the most viable option? What are the alternatives in your mind that the any household or any kitchen generator, the bulk generator of food waste, can use to manage their food waste?
Right. So, of course, our technology is my baby, right? So I will always say that it is the best, and I truly feel that. I guess the best way is to let the market decide it over time as to which one they prefer. But I will tell you my experience, right?
Sure.
So there are only two methods for waste management. We have to rely on nature, and bacteria are the one who do it, right? So there are two methods. One is called aerobic, and the process is referred to as composting. The other one is anaerobic, and the process is referred to as biogas or anaerobic digestion, right? So composting is something that has been tried a lot and was the first wave of people who actually tried to process their waste, and this has been going on since 2000. Okay, so it's not a new thing. It's what, 20 years now, right? So since 2000, people have been working, and for 15 years or so, they everybody tried to work with, or most people, right? So I'd say almost 90 to 95% of the solutions were composting. So composting, I would say, is great for raw waste or plant waste. But the moment you have wet food, it takes a lot. You need to put in sawdust, dry it up, and you also need to have a fair amount of space to execute composting over time. Since it takes about 20 days for the waste to actually compost well. Of course, then people say that they can dry it up with heaters. So now, but then the cost of power becomes so much, right? So
Correct.
practically, we would say you need 20 days to do it, 20 to 40 days, right, to do it. And it's a great solution for, I would say, tree waste. Horticultural waste is where it's really good. Or if you have a market with a lot of space available near it, so you can definitely do composting with a shredder. But the moment there's food waste, which is our rice, dal, curry, anaerobic digestion is actually something that's completely sealed. There's no odor. It's much faster. Effectively, you're putting in waste every day, you're getting output every day. So although technically we would say it's a 20-day retention time, right? The waste stays in for 20 days, but practically you put in waste every day and you're getting an output every day. So you don't have to really wait or do anything else once the waste goes in. So on a practical standpoint, anaerobic digestion for food waste from our Indian kitchens is sustainable. And another factor that our technology is reliability, right? So it's known, right? So this is scientifically known that the bacteria are extremely sensitive to temperature. So any anaerobic digestion system that we provide has temperature control inside, and that is what makes it reliable. Whereas conventional digesters were actually derived from the gobar gas technology. So they, especially anywhere in India, right? The temperature when it goes below 30 degrees or 28 degrees, essentially the process stops. So that's another reason for why many of the older biogas plants don't run sustainably. So now this is another learning that people know, and now even governments are demanding digesters with temperature control. So yeah, so we have temperature control. Then we need to agitate inside. So we have a method that does that very reliably. We have all the ancillaries around it. So we have a good feed station where you crush the waste. We have a gas storage under pressure, so the space requirement is minimum. You get a nice strong flame in your kitchen, so that the chef is also happy, that you can actually cook with it rather than a very weak flame which was available earlier. So yeah, so I guess for what we've done is we've taken the same engine, made it, modern, reliable, easy to use. I guess the analogy is if you look at the first cars that came out, in the early 1900s, they were, you needed actually a special person to make sure they ran. They were called mechanics, and everybody had a mechanic that fixed the cars, and and of course they had a lot of problems. They would get punctures. There were a lot of maintenance that took place. But now over time, today we think of a car, you turn the key and you drive, right? So you don't really need to know how it runs. So you need to modernize something and to make it, um, you know, modernize, and also make it reliable, to make it easy to use, which is what we've done.
So you provide sort of turnkey solutions to companies. So once they install, apart from certain man hours, any requirement that comes in, that will be catered by you.
Yeah, so we have a maintenance system, and all our systems are IoT enabled. So we get the data on our servers, and before the client knows something's wrong, we know that if something is off, and we immediately send in a service person with the spares. So the downtime is minimum, and yeah. So one of the things, these systems are living systems. They're bacteria, right? So if we keep them healthy, things, they keep running beautifully without much trouble. But yeah, the maintenance of the conditions for the bacteria are important, and if there's any downstream equipment that needs a small amount of maintenance, we take care of that for the company.
And what are the typical, let's say, the unit inputs and outputs involved? So for every, let's say, 100 grams of food waste that is put in the system, what are the outputs that get generated in form of gas, in form of manure?
Right. So I'd rather work with 1 kg, since yeah, it'll be a little easier. So for every 1 kg of waste in, you get about 100 grams of biogas uh, available, and you get about 1 liter of uh, liquid fertilizer, which is ready to use. So you can just mix it with equal quantity of water and use it in your plants.
Okay, and you earlier mentioned that from energy consumption, this generates 10x of the energy that is made in input. So overall, from any kitchen to install these systems, typically what is the net benefit that comes out to them? So how would their economics look like? Is that a net positive contribution to them, and at what point of time it pays back itself?
Right. So definitely is net positive, and we worked out, if you look at as a whole system, as a return on investment, it comes within 5 years. So one of the things with return of investment is what is is determined by the cost of disposal, right? So
Mhm.
if we don't factor any cost per disposal, then the return is five years approximately. But if you factor in a cost per disposal, right, which now a lot of municipalities have started putting in, or through some, there a lot of organizations are seeing these costs appear because they have to outsource to some agencies. Then you actually get a return in sometimes even within 1.5 years or 2 years.
And I think this is probably the one of the primary drivers right now, right? Because since there is so little cost of disposal, and if we look at in general the waste streams, there is a expectation that someone who's collecting waste would also pay me, right, for many other kind of waste right now. So waste is actually sold. Now, as the market induced behaviors are being controlled by the pricing mechanisms, and this is what is happening all over the world. So, there would be no surprise that even in India, we will have higher and higher cost of waste disposal, right? And which would start turning some of these economics in favor of the solutions that can help manage and reduce the waste. Because in the end, there is only so much land which is available for landfills, and the risks over there are also very well known, right?
Correct, correct. So yeah, it's a primarily a very practical aspect that there's no land where you can just and even our population is is aware, educated, it's politically very active. So earlier, things that went on can't go on today. So a lot of the regulation is due to the population very aware, resisting the lands near their fields or their villages being given for waste disposal. So then the cities just have a limited amount of land, and then they have to find some solution, and this is a law that they fall back on and say once so you have to do it, and the bulk generators can do it over time. So essentially, economically, there is no free method. So earlier you would pay a couple of thousand rupees a year, and all your waste disappear, all your food waste. So today it's not practical, right? So the economics also are coming into the action.
True. What kind of innovation that you see would enable these technologies and these processes to become superior to what they are right now? So what is it that you are working on? What do you see in general, all the entire solution industry working on in terms of innovations?
So one of the things that I talked about is a remote monitoring system. So we have the technology, and even the way we work has changed.
Mhm.
So being able to remotely monitor these systems, and when we say we're talking about, we'll have thousands or you know lakhs of systems everywhere, and in order to be able to have the capacity to service the system, being able to remotely monitor them and giving the right guidance to the people on the ground makes a huge difference in the ability to scale. So that's definitely one of the factors that today enable us to do this, to do these decentralized systems on a large scale. And other factors are, of course, the components that go into system are all uh, customized for our need, right? Because we're dealing with different media. We're dealing with biogas, which has fairly customized requirements in terms of materials. So currently, we have suppliers who are customizing these for us, and they're still at a fairly small scale, right? It's not like a car where you can say I want thousands or lakhs of certain component. So
Mhm.
over time, what will happen is as the demand grows, we'll be able to get customer even better, more engineering into all the components that goes into it, and we can refine them further, thereby increasing the reliability and bringing down the cost. So yeah, it's a currently it's a transition phase. Scale of demand isn't there, so that supply isn't there at the right cost. So as the demand increases, we'll be able to engineer better and better components at a better price.
And for anyone who might be on the fence, someone who realizes the importance of this, someone who faces the challenge and they would want to manage their food waste in a better way, what would be your message to them as to for the main factors that they should consider and to evaluate so that they can take a positive decision to install these systems?
Right. So someone who's on the fence, I would say. So a lot of people are on the fence because of the past experiences they've had. So I would request them is first come and look at our systems, right? Seeing is believing, and when you actually see how well they work and how long they work, that will put your mind at ease at first, right? That this is something that actually does work, right? That's the first level of confidence. And the second level is anybody who's bought these systems, right? As soon as they start using them, they are extremely happy, right? That they've done the right thing, that they're compliant, and they actually end up telling people about it, so it becomes something they're very proud of. So, so I would, yeah, encourage them to look at it, and then I assure you that once you do the right thing, you will be proud of yourself and your organization for taking the right steps.
So that is very helpful, Kabir. Thank you very much for sharing all these views. It is a big problem, and the waste in general, what we, uh, as they say, right? Waste is a waste only if you waste it. So the food waste is one of the biggest component of the urban waste that is being generated, and it needs to be managed. And we are running out of the options that we thought we had available with us. The landfills are not an option, both as a organized one or even for composting. There are several challenges. There are alternative ways, which are superior ways to manage that. And in fact, if we can recycle and reuse, and we can have those byproducts which are beneficial, there are all the more reasons to explore these options for everyone. Of course, there are challenges which will be involved, but it's a trade-off between different options that organizations have. So, thank you very much for sharing these opinions with us, Kabir.
Sure, sure. So actually, there's one more thought that came in. Maybe I'll
Sure.
just put it down here, and you can see if it's useful. So over time, right? One is, of course, this process we see of food getting processed, and biogas being used within the premises, something that is beautiful. But over time, what we actually want to see is, once cities start doing this on a mass scale, there'll be this large quantity of this beautiful organic fertilizer generated. And currently, there is no, uh, I would say, method or system in place to actually collect this, to actually standardize it, and to redistribute it to farmers, right? So that our quality of food really, really improves. So that's another downstream system and process that I believe will develop over time, and it will actually reduce our dependence on chemical fertilizers and pesticides and things like that. So our food quality, the cost to the farmer, everything will come down tremendously, and also cost to the community, right? Because today we spend heavily as a country on chemical fertilizers. So this is something that we do generate and can generate and distribute.
I think the point that you make is very important, because if we look at the larger picture, we are talking about these hundreds and thousands of organic material, right? Primarily food, which enters the cities from all the croplands. But for the next year crop to come, the nature would want a lot of this to be degenerated back and become soil again, which is not happening because nothing is going back. And this was the topic of one of my earlier conversation also, that it is very important that this goes back as fertile soil, so that the whole cycle can run in a sustainable manner. And as you rightly said, the costs of chemical fertilizers and everything else that is associated with it uh, is large, because you cannot just keep using chemical fertilizers and not have the natural soil regeneration that happens in those fertile lands. So the if we just purely think in terms of the overall ecosystem and sustainability, this is the logical thing that has to be done. So there are all the more reasons for everyone to think about this, of course, which goes beyond their economics. And but in the end, the short term decisions are always being made by any organization for their own immediate cost benefit analysis. And that is where the role of regulators and governments comes into play, to make sure that those calculations start turning more favorably towards these kind of solutions which are available.
Right, absolutely. And luckily we should be very proud that our government is doing its role. We have a lot of positive citizens, and I think as a nation we are very, very far ahead in this, in waste management, compared to how the world is working. Of course, there are other people also, but we should be proud that we actually one of the leaders in this field.
And I think our challenges are also much bigger, right? So with so much consumption, so much production that we have, it is very important that we maintain the right balance of that. So while we have bigger challenges, we also have probably the biggest opportunities to manage that.
Definitely, definitely.
Thank you very much once again, Kabir.
Sure. Thank you. Great talking to you.
If you are someone who has useful information on this subject or have success stories that you would like to share, please reach out to me. We need to build a community from all walks of life across the value chain to do our little bit in solving this problem. There are many things that divide us, but planet Earth unites us. Stay tuned for more content on sustainability. Take care and stay safe.